is Thursday morning, the 25th of August, 8 o'clock in the morning, which means, Andy, in Texas, it is Wednesday, the 24th.
5 o'clock p.m. Central
5
Time.
p.m. Excellent. So Andy Meadows is my victim for today, my guest for this LinkedIn live chat. I think, Andy, we met each other through EMP, but I'm not 100% sure, to be honest, because maybe we've met before that even, but it's definitely through Entrepreneurs Organization that we met. So I always think of you as Andy the person, Andy the entrepreneur. But when you meet new people, Andy, yes, I can say you're the owner and founder of Bl.ink, but we'll talk about that later. But how do you introduce yourself normally?
From a professional perspective, I usually tell people we make short links for big companies. So that's what Bl.ink does. I want to talk about myself personally. I've been married for 25 years. I've got 5 kids, and I live in Texas. So most of my life revolves around family and taking care of them, and a lot of our activities are all family-based. So it kind of depends on the setting. But yeah, it's always busy times on both sides.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I'm the family, because you are a massive big family man, and I met your beautiful family. You have some amazing kids, 5 of them, which I think is fabulous in itself. Like to be a family man while growing your business. So let's start there, because obviously your family is very important to you. How do you combine being a loving father, spending quality time with your 5 children, and run the business? How do you do that?
Well, I think the reality is that both sides are they're both 24-hour jobs. There are times when you're up at 3 o'clock in the morning with the family, and sometimes you're up at 3 o'clock in the morning with the business. So to me, it's really it's very much about balance, but it's not so much an equal balance. It's just more about knowing that there are cycles of the day, cycles of the month, cycles of the year, and sometimes in multiple years where some will require more time than others. And so there have been years where the family required more time, and then years where the business required more time.
Yeah.
It kind of ebbs and flows. And so a lot of it boils down to having a great and understanding wife who is very much takes care of things when I'm not around or when I'm focused on the business. And then she also knows that she can count on me, that when there are times when she needs, then she can pull me, and the business is going to have to wait, and it's focus on the family. So it's balance, but it's not an equal balance. It's just knowing that there's this pendulum that goes back and forth.
Yeah, yeah. And that's an interesting, because when we think about work-life balance, you often sort of think, okay, I've got 100% of my day. I spend so many hours on work, so many hours sleeping, so many hours on the family, so many hours on the kids, so many hours on me. But what you're saying is that there are certain times in the day, week, month, the year, decade, that you just need to focus more on one thing or another. So how did you come to that decision, or how did you come to that realization?
There's a journey to it for sure. I feel that going back and being honest with myself, the retrospective would be that in the earlier part of my professional life, it was very much about the business. I was always at the functions for the family. Anytime there was something important, I was there. I never missed mini games and things like that. There's always some things, but there were times when there were sacrifices. I remember being at one of our EMP events during my first time I missed one of my daughter's birthdays. And so that was a big event for me, just knowing that I wasn't there at a family function. And so there were a lot of times where I was traveling a lot, and so I wasn't home as much. And I didn't realize the impact that had until much later, when I realized not so much how much I had missed, but what the impact of my travel and impact of those activities really had on my family.
Yeah.
And so then it kind of swung the other direction, where it was very much around the family. And my wife had a big surgery, and so it was really about taking care of her and her recovery and being there. And so I was able to shift that pendulum back the other direction. And then now, as things have gone back to really much busier from a work perspective, we've gone back about it a different way, where there is definitely a balance, and it's understanding the priorities and knowing that everybody has to everybody's very much aware, and it helps. Of course, our kids are older now too, so that definitely
Mm,
helps. But my wife, she has this saying that I constantly try to remember is basically life is defined not by the hours you spend, but by the moments that you make. And
mm.
so a lot of times it's not how many hours I spend with my children, but am I there for those key moments? Do we make those key moments together? And do we have those activities that we do together that really are the memories that you'll remember for a lifetime?
Yeah, yeah. And we all have 2020 hindsight. So looking back at young Andy, just starting out with business, is there anything you would have done differently, knowing what you know now?
Oh yes, there's hundreds of things. Um, I'd say probably to sum it up, I wasted a lot of time doing a lot of things that ultimately didn't get me where I wanted to go.
Hmm.
And so, younger me, I would tell them to prioritize things more, to be more disciplined about what it is that I wanted and the path that was going to get there. I think I took a lot of side streets, a lot of twisty journeys to get to a destination. And I think there are ways that could have been faster. Of course, you never know because history is history, but it feels in
So
hindsight that I spent a lot of time.
how do you do that prioritization? Because it's, easy to say now, like, okay, I should have prioritized, I should have taken a straighter road to where I wanted to be. Um, but how do you do that? How do you make those? Because isn't part of the Andy you've become now because of the diversions and the touristic routes that you've taken?
Yeah, it's true. It's one of those things. Your experience comes from lessons you make, lessons you observe from others. So I definitely made my number of mistakes, and I've definitely learned from those. So you could say that they have formed who I am. And so as I, my oldest daughter is going off to college, and so as I explained to her, part of it is as you do make these mistakes, you have this maturity that you have figured out by understanding what you like and don't like, what you're willing to do, what you're not willing to do, and really where you choose to focus your efforts and energy. So for me, having the having those experiences are important, but really understanding what the different methodologies of how you focus on what's most important to you,
Mhm.
and really evaluating that on a regular basis. And so I think a lot of times you think that I'm going to do A because A will lead me to B, but a lot of times it's really not the case. And knowing when to pull the plug. And so I think that sometimes you spend too long chasing something and realize that that was not
Mm.
the right thing chasing after all.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's such a rabbit hole to go into, isn't it? And it's so difficult to pull yourself out of there and go like, no, this is not helpful. This isn't what I'm supposed to be doing.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes I find you dig a hole that you really can't stop. You have an obligation to get to a certain point, so I have to
Mm.
follow through on that commitment. But I recognize, okay, that's a commitment I'm not going to make anymore. That's
Yeah.
something I'll learn from and kind of add that to the list.
Yeah. So tell me more about Blink. Tell me more about the business that you've created now, because this is not an overnight success. You've been working and chipping away at it for a long, long time. So how did it start? Just explain the journey.
Sure. Yeah. So when we first met, I actually had a services company. So we built software for other people. And part of that process was to create a product for ourselves. And so we did. Um, that product at the time was called Bud URL. And so we created that. And then we also had a hosting company. So these three separate products
Hmm.
all lived underneath the same roof, used the same people, the same resources, and so forth. But we realized that there were different trajectories. And so one of the things that EMP taught me was how to focus that and how to align again that direction I wanted to get to. So over time, we sold off the hosting company, we shut down the services company, we focused on the product, and so really we doubled down on the product side of things, and really focused all of our efforts on that. Ultimately, ended up selling the business to another company, and then that was about 5 years ago, and so worked for them for a few years, and then ended up buying it back almost 2 years ago. So in that process, so I started it, sold it, bought it back, and now we're running it again.
Mm, yeah.
Um,
Let let
and
let let's
been
wind
great.
wind back a little bit because you sort of glance over that, sort of like, yeah, they this and this and this and this and this. Uh, let's step back. You sold your hosting company, which in itself is a big thing to identify. We need to cut up the business and only focus on the product. So let's start there. What made you realize that that's the way forward?
Well, I realized as we were looking at what's the end game? What is the exit potential for each of these? Where are they going to go as they grow up and evolve? And I realized that each one had a different outcome. There were different paths, and all the paths were fine, but each one was going to have a different direction. And so we took the time and effort to split them up financially, split them up legally, and really have three separate entities so that they could all move and evolve on their own. And so that really helped tremendously when we got to that point where when we found a buyer for the hosting company, we had it buttoned up, ready to go, and it was a nice package we could hand off.
Yeah.
When it came down to winding down the services company, we wrapped up our jobs, we handed it off to somebody else who took the customers and kept moving. So that was that trajectory. In the business, the product side, um, because again, it was standalone at that time, it could move on its own, and so it did. So really just having that understanding where we wanted to get to and knowing that
Mm.
we really things we could do now to get us there smoother and later
Yeah.
on in the time would be
So
good.
then why did you decide to sell the product business? Because having a product business sounds like almost like, I know it sounds really crass, but almost like a license to print money. Like you've made a product, people buy it, it's, it just keeps going and going and going. So it seems like the goose with the golden egg. So why did you sell it at that time?
So we were actually we didn't try to sell it; it just kind of fell into our laps. At the time, we were actually looking at raising money, and so we were talking to investors and meeting with different folks. And along that process, somebody happened to reach out and ask if we were interested in selling. And so we evaluated again. We raise money. Here's that trajectory. We sell the business. Here's that trajectory. Again, looking at that end game. And so when we looked at what's the basically risk versus reward, what's the timeline that's involved, what is it going to require from us individually? And so ultimately we made the decision that the best route for us was to take the exit and to go ahead and
Mm.
sell at that point, as opposed to raising money and moving down that path.
Yeah.
And so ultimately that's what we did.
Yeah. And what did the company look like at the time that you sold it?
So we had pretty good growth. We were a small team of about probably 10 or 12 people. Um, But again, from that standpoint, we were looking at what is that trajectory of opportunity. And
Mm.
at the time, our business and our market has evolved quite a bit over the last 5 years. And so at the time, it felt kind of stagnant. We weren't quite sure exactly
Mm.
what the right path was, what the differentiation was, how we were going to grow up and evolve. We were kind of in that what I call the adolescent stage. And so that there's different ways you can grow up. And so we were looking at, okay, what are we going to look like when we grow up? And at that time, we didn't know. We were too immature. And so 5 years later, we now know very much who we are, what we've become, where we want to go, and so that's just that part of that
Yeah.
process.
Yeah. And then you sell, but you also sell yourself. So you had to stay on the business as part of the payout.
Yes, yeah. So I had an obligation to stay for 1 year, and I liked the company. They were nice people. Everything was going well, so I stuck around,
Mm.
and thankfully I did. So I ended up working for them for 3 years, and shortly after we got acquired, they were actually acquired, and so the
Mm.
strategy changed, and so the direction that we were intending to go didn't work out. We
Mhm.
kind of got set to the side while the new owners kind of went a different direction. And
Mm.
so over time, we realized that, again, kind of playing it out, what does the end look like for us? We realized that the end there was not going to be ideal. And so we talked to them about, basically, let's find a new home for Blink.
Yeah.
And so at that time, it was, find somebody else to buy it, sell it to me, and so forth. And so ultimately, we ended up buying it back.
Yeah. Yeah. So what was that like, that interim period? Because that sounds to me like a really difficult position to be in. Um, Going from growing, selling, splitting up, you know, being very entrepreneurial, very strategic, to becoming an employee basically of the business. I mean, you obviously enjoyed it to the extent that you stayed for 3 years. Um, how was that transition? Because I'm just curious what that's like. Because you know how people always say, like, "Oh, I could never work for a boss," and I just go like, "BS." So, what was it like for you?
It was the most comfortable I had been in years, and also the most frustrating. Um,
Okay.
it was difficult. I'm not going to lie. It was definitely a challenge for me mentally and emotionally to transition from boss to employee, because there are differences. The people I worked for, they were great. I loved my boss. I loved the company. They were nice people, incredibly intelligent. It was amazing having resources, people that were excellent at what they did, that could come in and provide their point of view. So that was fantastic. But I also felt very different in the standpoint that I was no longer able to call the shots. We couldn't move the
Mm,
direction I wanted to, when we wanted to, how we wanted to. Um, so it's great to have that extra infrastructure, but it was also, as my wife said, I've never seen you more unhappy than you were. It's not that I was overworked or it was a bad job. It's just it wasn't the job that I had been used to doing, and so it was
yeah.
different. It was very difficult for me. It's kind of the square peg in the round hole. I was trying to fit in and really struggled with that.
Yeah, yeah, makes sense. And especially the fact that you can't be as strategic and as quick as you want to be, and you always have to ask other people for permission to make your moves. So,
Yeah,
because I mean that's what I'm envisioning to be the hardest part of stepping into that employee role, where you go like you can't just say like, oh, let's turn left, just see where we end up.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because
yeah
it's
it's
no
it's
longer your money.
yeah, exactly. It's to me that entrepreneurism is really a series of continual experiments, and so not being able to have that freedom to experiment is a bit of a challenge sometimes. And so having
Yeah,
that environment where you can be creative and a little bit reckless within reason to try things and identify what fits and what doesn't. And,
yeah,
to me, that really helps you uncover those new opportunities that were not there before.
yeah, yeah. Makes sense. Totally. Hey, this is probably a really good time to sort of step into the compliance and risk management component, because like we said earlier, or before we started the live streaming, our business out of service has made a major evolution in the past 22 years as well. So what we're really focusing on is to give our clients control over their risk management and compliance issues, rather than be controlling and be that consultant that does everything for them. So
Absolutely.
from your point of view, focusing on compliance and risk management and being in control of those processes and the technology and everything around that, how did that focus change from being the owner, founder, entrepreneur to being the employee? Or did it not change at all?
No, it definitely changed. There's a load that you carry. There's a burden that you carry. So ultimately, that responsibility stops with me. So it's no matter what anybody else does, even if they're doing everything the right way, if there's ever an issue, it's ultimately my responsibility. So I definitely feel that because we work with very large companies, compliance is a huge component of that. And so
Mm,
making sure that we're following the right processes, we know that they have their process that they have to follow, and so we as become an extension of their company, and so we have to do what we need to do to make sure that they are compliant as well. So it's a massive piece for our business.
yeah. But that doesn't change whether you're an employee or the owner, apart from the ultimate accountability. But the focus doesn't change. You're still swiveling head on the stick, figuring out where where the bear's coming from.
Yeah, it's really it doesn't diminish anything. It doesn't there's not a job that gets removed. There's still responsibility. If anything, it's extra plates to spend because I can't point at somebody else and say that's their job. It's ultimately my job to make sure it gets done. So um, it's still had to get done before. It has to get done now, and
Mm,
compliance is, as you well know, it's something that's ever changing and constantly evolving, and there's always bad guys trying to do bad things, and so you always have to stay a step ahead. And so it's never you can really never let your guard down. And being in that mode all the time can be very stressful. So having
yeah,
the right services and tools is really important.
yeah. And how did your compliance focus change from the moment you've decided to sell the hosting, split up, sell what now turned into Blink? Um, how did compliance become more of an, or did it become more of an issue rather than business as usual? We're just running the company.
Yeah, being an employee somewhere, it's these are the tools that I've been given, and so
Mm,
I had to work with. I had the tools that I had in my tool belt, and so from a compliance standpoint, I didn't really have much authority to enact any kind of controls or processes. And not that they were bad, but if we needed to do something a certain way, I could ask for it, but it wasn't my responsibility, or I didn't have the authority to make sure it happened. And so
mm,
now, as our customers are requiring us to be compliant in certain ways and meet certain standards and processes, we have to make sure that we are continually on our toes, that we're doing the right things, so that we're following those guidelines. Because ultimately, as we're serving these organizations, their compliance standards are growing
Mm.
every single day to try to keep their customers safe. And so, as I said, we become an extension of that, and so it is a constant activity that we're always looking at.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's become part and parcel of running a business, isn't it? You cannot run a business without being aware of risks, compliance, all those standards, rules, processes, etc. So it's business
Absolutely, and
101.
yeah, and from our perspective, it's even more critical. You think about, HR. As I grow the company, I need to add people, and so I need HR functions. And ultimately, from a compliance standpoint, before you hire the first person, you must have certain controls in place. There must be certain aspects of that. It has to be something that's ingrained in the culture from the very beginning, and that's difficult because it
Yeah,
is. Like I said, there are extra hurdles to jump through.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So speaking of hurdles you had to jump through, you bought Blink back. Obviously, that's not something you decide overnight. Tell me more about that process, because the moment I mentioned that, you took a deep breath. So I'm sure there's a story there.
Yeah, it's when the first time the opportunity presented itself, I was apprehensive. I really wasn't sure if I wanted to buy it back. Um, Not that I was down on the business at all, but the question of is, did I want to step back in that role? And so the first person I talked to about it was my wife, and she said, "Well, of course you do. That's why are you asking me? Why isn't this done already?" Her encouragement was tremendous, and that was a huge aspect of that. Is just knowing that she was willing to get back on that bus, having been off of the bus for a while. She was willing to get back onto it, and not only that, but she was willing to put gas in there and push to get it going. So that was tremendously helpful. And then the second thing was our team, making sure that we had the right people that were willing and able to come along for the ride. My co-founder, making sure that he was willing to go back into it. Again, kind of getting that point, he was still there as well, and so making sure that he was on board. It's one of those things. It couldn't be done without both of us, and so
Mm,
making sure that he was as committed as I am was a key part of that. And so once we had that commitment, then it was a matter of logistics. How do we get it done? But knowing that we were both as excited about the business as we had ever been, it was just a matter of, are we excited about being back in the driver's seat? And so once I
yeah,
realized that we actually both were, then it was really, how do we get going?
yeah. That's so exciting. And how do you run the business differently now than from what you did before? What changes have you made in Blink 2.0?
Yeah, so we've been able to evolve the product in a way that, as I mentioned before, we were kind of in that adolescent stage. We didn't really know where we were going, what we wanted to be when we grow up. And our product has continued to evolve and really become different than our competitors. And so there's only a few people that play in the realm that we do. There's dozens of link shorteners and that kind of thing. But when you get into the enterprise link management space, there's very few people that play there. And so our product has been able to evolve into new areas, new features, new functions. Again, looking at an enterprise, looking at governance and compliance, and making sure that we can help them, that our product can actually help them get their job done, as opposed to adding more to their plate.
Hmm.
So that's been a big aspect of it, and also being able to roll out new products. So we've got a new product coming out later this year, and that's available completely because we were able to talk to customers, listen to the market, identify that there was a gap, and then put the resources behind it. And so being
Yeah,
able to move quickly, those opportunities came very quickly. We had days in order to figure it out, and so we were able to make it happen. So that
yeah,
kind of thing, it's really being able to move that quickly and be that nimble is something that we didn't have before, and today it's really been a defining factor for our
yeah,
success.
yeah. That's awesome. Can't wait.
Yeah.
Um, so the nimbleness is that a word? Being nimble. How did you create that? Like, did you employ all your previous team members back into the business? Have you made changes in the processes and the systems that you use to run the operations of the business? Um, how did you set it up? Basically 2.0. How did you do that? And how did you what changes did you make?
Yeah, I think first and foremost is making sure that everybody was on the bus. That everybody not only are they in the right seat on the bus, but they have to be excited about being on the bus, so they're committed to that. And so,
Mm,
as we were starting this out and explaining, here's where we want to go, here's what we want to do, we knew that as a small team getting started with where we were, we needed to make sure everybody was committed to that. And so we did, we had those conversations. We made sure everybody was excited about it, and we try to communicate as much as we can with all the changes that are happening as quickly as they are. In some ways, we have truly grown up and matured a bit in terms of documentation and process. There's clearly a long ways to go, as everybody. There's always miles to go, but we try to do things in a way that will be more scalable in the future as we continue to grow. That we can grow gracefully. It is every day is challenging. There's always a lot of things going on every single day. They're definitely not boring, certainly
mm,
not quiet. But making sure that we're working together in a very cohesive way. There's no that's not my job or I can't help with that. It's we're truly all trying to get everything done and keep the customers happy at every point.
yeah,
So that's probably first and foremost is
yeah,
all about the people.
yeah. And with those people, with that team, what is the thing that you're most proud of in let's just focus on Blink, on what you have now. What change did you make with your team that you go like, I did not expect. I just didn't even think that was possible. I'm so proud of this.
Um, Honestly, I really feel like what's one of the things that's great about our team is that there's never a question of is something going to get done or is it possible or is somebody going to get their job done. There's very much a reliance on if somebody says they will do it, it'll get done, and there's comfort and confidence in knowing that that person not only knows what their job is, but they're capable, willing, and eager to do it. And so there's a piece that I have in knowing that if I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, they're going to be doing what they're supposed to be doing, and ultimately that leads us in the right direction.
Yeah.
So there's great peace in that, and
Mm,
definitely great opportunity in that as well.
yeah. And how did you create that? Like if you had to explain that to a group of accelerators, like how do you explain, how did you create that peace of
Um,
mind and that team? What's the
yeah,
secret?
yes. I wish I could tell you it's on chapter 8 of some book and just go follow that, but the reality is, I think it's a combination of finding the right people. There's a certain mindset of somebody who is really in it. They're here. They're willing to show up, and not because they're looking to collect a paycheck, but they're showing up because they like who they work with. They like how they do things. They like the way they do things, um, and ultimately what we're trying to work on. And so I think that's a part of it is knowing how to find those people. And so the key thing of hiring is so critical because it's so easy to derail that. And then I think the other aspect of that is modeling. Really trying to make sure that I'm the one. If I'm not doing my job, I don't expect them to do their job.
Hmm,
And so I really try to be the person that I want everyone else to be, hoping that by setting that example that they will follow my lead and at the same time show me where I'm falling short and help
hmm,
me to become the better person that I can be. So there's not only a that give and take, but it's really that the modeling and the mirroring of watching and seeing from each other and being open to learning from each other as well. There's definitely not a I don't think I have all the answers, and I certainly learn from them every single day.
hmm. No. So do you feel that your experience as being a father of five, that those experiences translate into running a business of, what did you say, 20 or something now at the moment?
There's only about a dozen total of
Okay.
people that
Yeah.
work on Bl.ink. So yeah, but so from a family aspect, for sure, I think it's actually harder for the family. The kids have to do what I say because I'm the dad.
Mm.
But with the team, they don't have to do what I say. They have the option of walking away, whereas my kids don't. Uh, but there's
Yeah, but
definitely
the reason why I'm picking that up is you have female teenagers and college age kids. Um,
yeah,
I'm just wondering if they really do everything you say, and if that experience of managing them through their life and through their journey has taught you to become the leader that you are in the business.
yeah, I would imagine if somebody were to look into it, they would probably. probably extract something like that. But I do feel, my kids, when I think about, when I see who they are and who they're becoming, they are they're fantastic. They don't fight. They bicker a little bit, but they don't fight like I did with my sisters. They really work together, and they are growing up together. And so there's that process of keeping them very much on the rails at a certain point in their life, and then knowing that they have seen the behavior, they've seen it modeled, they've had those expectations. And they're very high expectations here. However, there's also that freedom and autonomy to be who you are. And
Mm.
so as my oldest goes off to college, I have very little concern from the standpoint of knowing how she will behave in certain environments, because I know who she is. And
Yeah.
so I really feel confident that she knows who she is as well.
Mm.
Uh, so it's one of those. I'm very proud of that aspect from the standpoint that my wife and I have very much been on the same page as far as how the kids grow up, what the expectations are, what the rails look like, and the bumpers in bowling. You can, as long as you're going down the alley, it's fine.
Yeah.
But there's definitely the bumpers that are there for
Yeah.
a while. But
Yeah, but it is interesting because you're using the same kind of words. So like it's the modeling behavior, like, showing the behavior that you want in their life, but also in your business life. It's being very proud of who you have on your team, because your eyes lit up when you started talking about your team as well. It's very much the high standards that you have, both for your kids, but also for your team members. I'm seeing some parallels here.
sure, for sure, yeah. And on the corollary to that, there's definitely times where I hear something or see something my daughter is doing, and I'm like, oh, that's definitely me. That's exactly what I said yesterday, and
Mm,
now I know not to say that anymore. Or
yeah,
like, oh, I can see that. I can see my behavior coming out in them, and so it encourages me to change my own behavior. So again, that
yeah,
standpoint of learning from them as much as they're learning from me, for
yeah. It's
sure.
confronting, isn't it?
For sure. Very scary.
Very, very scary. So you said this with Blink, like back to the business. With Blink, you said it's enterprise link management, or it's enterprise link shortening. So it's like the Bitly, but then for grown up businesses. Um, and there's not a lot of competition. So how do you grow? Are you building the demand? Are you creating the demand? What's next for Blink, I suppose, is the question.
Yeah, so from our standpoint, we have always believed that that what we do is a common part of every organization. That we're just something that every company of any size really has to have in their stack at some stage of their evolution. And so, really, for us, it's very much a long game. It's being in the game for the long run. Um, and so, what we found is that as customers have realized this over time, they're starting to look for who are the organizations that they can go to that can meet their needs from compliance, from procurement, from billing, and how we work with their governance teams and so forth. And so when you look at a link shortener, there's dozens of link shorteners, and the prices range all over the book. But when it gets into what an enterprise organization is looking for, what's most important to them, and sometimes it's less about the features and more about how those features are executed. And
Mm,
it's also approaching their business and their needs not from a here's our widget fits over here, but more from a consultative approach that says, what is the problem you're trying to solve? Let me make sure I can solve that in the most meaningful way possible. And sometimes that is we've already solved it and it's a matter of implementing our product. In other cases, it's about our product evolving to meet their needs. And what we ultimately find is that when one organization has a need, we find that other organizations have that exact same need. Sometimes they have it right now, sometimes they have it in a few months or a few years. But we've yet to meet a company that said that they needed a particular feature and they were the only one that was ever going to need that. And so when they start looking at who else offers this, the more that we create, ultimately, there's fewer and fewer organizations that can serve those customers.
yeah,
And so very
yeah,
much being there when they're ready for you.
yeah. So there's really this customer focus and constant asking and identifying changing, growing needs, and stepping into that gap. So
Yeah,
that's
absolutely. Never being content to rest on your laurels and say, well, this is the widget we have, and you either like it or you don't. And if you don't like it,
mm,
then good luck. So
yeah,
we're very much the opposite. It's very much what is it you're trying to do, and let me either show you how we can do it, or let us try if it makes sense. let us evolve to be that solution for you.
Yeah, yeah, that's fantastic. And just, just in case somebody's listening to this or watching this and think like, why on earth do I need a link shortener? Why on earth do we need a link shortener? What's the benefit of it?
Yeah. So somebody once told me that the reality is that the problems that we solve, we just happen to do it with short links. You could do it with different things, but a lot of people don't realize that the answer to a lot of the things that they're trying to do is a short link company, or in this case, again, like we call it link management. Because ultimately, when you think about it, our customers spend millions of dollars creating these assets and resources and destinations. And they spend millions of dollars trying to create these audiences. Ultimately, they're trying to connect those two together. And what ends up connecting them is ultimately a link. And so that link can be accessed through a QR code, through a text message, through a browser, through a beacon, or through any kind of wireless technology. But ultimately, it's that URL that connects those together. And when you start looking at URLs, you realize that the best URLs are those that have attribution and tracking and insight and campaign details. But adding all that into that link becomes very unwieldy, very large,
Mm.
and very complicated and very fragile. But when you're able to take that and wrap that in that perfect branded short link, then suddenly you have all the insight, all the analytics, all the details in a compliant, structured, managed, and organized manner. That suddenly, when everybody in the organization is using the same system to create those connections, then there's a great ability to align that and get tremendous value from that. Not
Yeah,
only from a business standpoint, but from analytics and resources and organization.
yeah. Okay. So it's really to help with the marketing and connecting with customers, so that you don't have that paragraph long URL with all the all the
Yes.
gobbledygook in it.
Yeah, the best way to think about it I answered your question in a paragraph. To answer it in a sentence is the best links are short, and in order to when you
Memorable.
click on that, yeah, short and memorable. And so when you click on that to expand that into all the data that the enterprise is looking for, we make that happen.
Yeah, yeah,
So
makes sense.
that's the key part.
Yeah. So what's the future for this technology? Because I mean, there's so much changing in internet world. There's that, and it's just seems to be going in multiple directions. So get your crystal ball out. Where's the future going?
So for us, what we see is the number of people that are creating branded short links are increasing tremendously. If you think about the touch points, every organization wants more touch points with their customers, more touch points with the consumer. And in order to do that, again, that's more and more links. And so
Mm,
again, whether that's integrating or interacting through product packaging or signage, it's all about that interaction. And so, from our standpoint, we look at what are all the different ways that people want to connect? How do they want to do that? And they need something that can scale immensely with tremendous size and speed, creating millions of links in a matter of seconds. And doing that at enterprise scale is critical. So when you start looking at these companies that invest heavily in things like Salesforce or in their marketing platform, like with Adobe, and so looking at those footprints that they have, it's really about being part of that ecosystem, the part of that enterprise stack. And so we look at how do we play in that? How do we help more people in that organization create that perfect link?
yeah, yeah, and it's about the clarity that you give them. So it's everybody using the same system.
Yes, exactly. It goes back to when everybody's on the same bus doing the same thing the same way. We've had companies that have come to us where they'll have, 200 different departments that are using individual accounts with different link shorteners, and they're all over the map. They're unmanaged. They can't manage them. There's no governance to them. And so
Mm,
when they unify all that together underneath one platform, suddenly everyone knows what everybody's working on. They can learn from each other. They have best practices. They can compare analytics together because they're all using the same tool with the same vision.
yeah, yeah. So from a more what do you say? Mate, no, I don't want to use the word meta, but it's like from a bigger picture, because a lot of these links are used for marketing. What is the trend that you're seeing from a marketing point of view? What is it more links used for SMS marketing? Are links more used towards QR codes? Are links more used? Is email still a big thing? Like, what are you seeing at a macro? That's the word I was looking for. At a, a macro level.
Yes. So Email is definitely still being used. I kind of equate it to television and advertising. You think, okay, well, television is going away because all the digital advertising, and really television has never been any bigger. So email is still definitely a component of that, and Blink definitely plays a role in email marketing. But some of the newer trends are really SMS and QR codes, tremendously popular lately. Those are probably two of the biggest growing segments for us. On the QR code side, it's a lot of it is dynamic, being able to have a single QR code that can change dynamically based on which country you're in or which language you speak. And so having that single entry point that goes to multiple destinations is a component of our platform and something that our customers are adopting rapidly. On the SMS side, it's really much more about that one-to-one communication. Instead of, if I've got 100,000 people on my marketing list through SMS, I could send them all the same link, or I could send 100,000 different links, and I can know exactly who clicked, when they clicked, where they clicked, how many times they clicked, and then ultimately if they engaged, if they converted, and so forth. And so when you empower these companies to suddenly say, well, instead of sending one link to your entire mailing list, why don't you send everyone their own personal link? Suddenly it becomes a game changer because they're used to doing that from an email perspective, but they haven't been able to do that from an SMS perspective very well, at least not in a branded way. And so once they can see this branded environment where they can see that perfect link with their brand on it and something unique for every recipient, their eyes light up and it's like Christmas for them.
Yeah, yeah. And is that also because then you go back to that, zero party data that you're getting from your direct, SMS people, that you really can identify who's interested in certain components of our marketing, because that part has changed so much, hasn't it?
Yes, yeah, data privacy is still tremendously important. And so companies, when they look at those touch points, used to be I could go out and I would just buy data from someone. Oh, somebody's going to aggregate this, or I can use third-party cookies and so forth. And these days, it's very much different where companies have to create their own touch points, they have to create their own data. And so by doing all this one-to-one marketing, they are collecting it, but they're doing it in a way where A, they're responsible for it, but then also B, they're able to do it in a way that allows them to really learn without having to go through and kind of wade through the trash that they might have picked up along the way, because it's truly about their customer and their engagement. So
Yeah,
building that relationship with the customer is still critical, but these companies are looking at how can we do that more and more together with our own data as opposed to relying on others.
yeah, yeah. And you do this for your clients, but then for your own marketing, how has your own marketing changed in the last 5 years, and what's the future of your marketing approach, inbound
Yeah,
or outbound?
Yeah, so from our standpoint, I've said we've gone from nothing, having no marketing, into creating what we look to be the ideal marketing solution for us. Ultimately, our standpoint is it's very much around creating the right content that we can educate the audience, and looking at that inbound strategy of creating the content that will answer the questions, and again looking at creating that level of expertise that when they realize, okay, well, here's Blank, they've been in market for 15 years. They know exactly what our problems are. They have dozens of customers that all have the same problem that they've solved it for, and have kept them all for years and years. They start realizing that, okay, well, here's the link of record, and I want that organization to be part of our system to help us implement the right solution there. So really, for us, marketing is about content creation and making sure that we're creating that right level of expertise in the eyes of our customers.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's building that authority that you know what you're talking about, and you're the trusted advisor and the trusted partner. That's the main focus. Am I saying that correct?
Absolutely. Yeah, you nailed it.
Nailed it.
Good job.
So then, like I said before, we went live. Like, it's been 10 years since, or next year will be 10 years since we finished our entrepreneurial masters program. A lot has changed in the last 10 years, especially for you. Buying,
Thanks.
selling, employing, being the employee. That it's been a bit of a roller coaster. Um, the next 10 years, where do you see yourself going? You personally, you Andy, like not you the business, but you.
Yeah, for me, I'm at the stage we talked briefly earlier about the timeline of life, and
Mm,
kind of where we are. And so as I've over the last 10 years evolved, I feel like I'm on the other side of the spectrum. And so for me, a lot of it is really looking at, as we talked before about with business, wanting to look at what is the end game, where do I want to end up somewhere down the road. And so I'm very much spending time thinking about where do I want to end up? What's the right path that's going to get me to where I want to be? And so part of it is really figuring out what do I want my life to look like 10 years from now? What does work look like? I don't anticipate retirement as something that I'll do or enjoy. So it's really what I want my life to look like. And so how do I want to get to that point? And what are the steps that I need to take now to get there? How
Mm.
do I make sure that my kids get there, that they're where they want to go, and that I'm helping them along the way? And then how do I make sure my wife is where she wants to get to? And so it's really, as we look at how we have gotten to where we are today, uh, being able to continually refine that to get better, to get rid of the things that we don't like, and add more of what we do. And so it's constant check in of knowing, am I going the right direction based on what makes a good life for me?
Yeah. And I'm assuming that that's more than just ticking off things off a bucket list.
Yes, yeah. It's again, it goes back to those moments. It's really about having the opportunity and the time to create those moments,
Mm.
to not feel that you're stuck or that I'm going to end up the same place that I am now 10 years from now. It's about having that forward momentum and that trajectory that takes me where I want to go and who I want
Yeah.
to be. So it's again that constant review of is this the right place for me? Am I going the right direction? And there's some days where I realize I am not going in the right direction. I need to change
Mm.
course.
Yeah.
And so it's having that presence of mind to do so.
Yeah. I love how deliberate you are and how you're really focused on the the end game, as you say. Like you're really focused on where do I want to be when I grow up? What do I want to do? How do I want my life to look like? Which I have this thing in the back of my head now that's going. A lot of the discussions I'm having with business owners and entrepreneurs come back to managing your health, not just your physical health, but also your mental health, and how important that is for the marathon that we're running, which is basically running our businesses, but also life in general. So, how deliberate are you around your physical mental health? What is your regime? What are your priorities? How do you manage your health?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, I have gotten very deliberate about working out and exercise. So about 3 years ago, I started an exercise program that I've fortunately stayed on. So I'm working out 5 days a week, and so spending about an hour a day, every day, Monday through Friday, just really trying to be physically exhausted at the end. So really giving it all I've got. And then also finding with that what works for me. So as I remind my coach every day, my body is, I'm not the same age as him. I'm twice his age. So it's a matter of figuring out what is the right exercises for me and what can I do that's going to make me healthier and not get injured along the way. So that's part of that process as well. Because it has to be something that it is continual. It's not I'm going to be done when I get to this point, or I'll be done after so many workouts. It is a
Mm.
commitment for life. And I didn't have that years ago. And so I realized that my health, um, again, looking at my kids, my youngest is 8, so I've got a long ways to go. Um, so being healthy for my family is critical. Being healthy for my business is critical. And so making that a priority, that was a huge thing for me,
Yeah.
and really sticking with
So
that.
what
And
changed 3 years ago? Why did you start that 3 years ago?
um, I think it's for me. I was not happy. I wasn't healthy. I weighed a lot. I was unhappy. I wasn't feeling physically healthy. I wasn't feeling mentally healthy. It was a distraction for me, and so um, my boss at the time actually mentioned the book, and so I read the book, and that really changed my perspective on not what I'm going to do today or tomorrow, but where am I going to be a year from now, where I'm
Mhm.
going to be 2 years from now, 3 years from now. So looking back, I had no idea where I'd be where I am now 3 years ago, but the fact that I've again, continued working out 5 days a week is something the me of 25 or 35 or even 45 would not have said that that's reality, but it
Yeah.
is, and so that's a big part. So that's on the physical side. The mental side for me is critical as well. Part of that exercise is a lot of quiet time. So doing things by myself with not a lot going on in my mind. There's no music, no podcasts. So people go and they work out and they listen to something. They're constantly consuming something. And so for me, it's very much the opposite. There are hours at a time where there's no noise at all. It's me and my footsteps. So in that regard, that's a big part. And some people aren't happy or comfortable with silence and with their own thoughts.
Mm.
And for me, I very much have changed my perspective on that. Probably about 12 years ago, 13 years ago, I started doing silent retreats. So once a year, I would take a 3-day silent retreat, and that was where I learned to be very comfortable with silence and listening to myself. So that's a huge part, is being able to just take a moment and look back at who you are and where you are, and listen to what's going on in your brain. It really helps to settle things and have perspective.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so funny, not funny, haha, but interesting you bring up those silent retreats because I've been talking to quite a few people about them. I'm so intrigued by the retreat concept. Um, I'm like, 3 days of silence sounds blissful, but then a lot of people say like, yeah, but you're also not allowed to read and write, and that for me, I go like, yeah, no, no, that's it.
But
So how
everyone
is
does
that
it differently.
experience? Hmm?
Yeah, I would say everybody does it differently. So for me, when I would go on my silent retreats, I would read. In fact, I would usually read 3 to 5 books because suddenly I had this time. I had the opportunity to ingest whatever it was that I wanted to. So I could be very deliberate about what I was going to read, and then take the time to process it. A lot of times we read a book and we go on to the next one. There's a lot of people that talk about, oh, I read a book a week and so forth. And for me, I think that would be a horrible thing, because to me, there's a certain aspect of having the time to process what you've just learned. And so
Mm,
you can't put it into practice unless you have that time to really understand how it's going to change you. And so for me, that quiet time is, I always refer to it as my defragment time. So if you think about a hard drive of days gone by, you would defragment your hard drive to put things in order so it would be a little faster and a little more organized. And so for me, that's very much what my brain would do, is kind of organize and get rid of the things I didn't need and reorganize the stuff that I wanted to keep. And so that, being able to pick up those books or do those things, take notes, journal, write those things, really, that all those things happen during that time. And it's a real gift to yourself as well as to everyone around you.
yeah, it sounds amazing. It sounds so good.
I can't recommend it enough. To me, 3 days is never enough.
Yes, because some people do it for like 9 or 14 days.
Oh yes, yeah, yeah. There you can take retreats from 24 hours to 30 days. And there are all kinds of flavors. Every religion or thought or experience you're looking for, there is a retreat out there for it.
Yeah, yeah, fantastic. Well, let's finish it up there. Thank you so much, Andy. It's been an amazing journey. Thank you for sharing your thoughts and ideas and your experiences. Anything you wish to say as a parting thought or favorite quote or anything you want to finish this off with?
I think if I could summarize it all, I don't know if this is the greatest thing to say in the world, but I was talking to my daughter recently about this. She's going off to college, and my advice to her was, is figure out who you are, figure out who you want to be, and then plot a path that will get you from one to the other, and be comfortable with that journey, because everybody's is different. Your journey will cross with others, but ultimately, my greatest success is trying to understand who I am and where I want to go, and enjoying the journey, because it's not about the destination, it's very much about the journey.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Andy. So that's the end of our Out of Service live this Thursday, the 25th of August. Andy, how can people connect with you if they want to reach out?
Absolutely. You can reach me at Andy@Bl.ink. It's BL.INK. Or catch me on LinkedIn as well. I'm easy to find.
Yeah, fabulous. Now, this is streamed on LinkedIn, so people can easily find you on LinkedIn. So thank you again. Don't run off, and because so we can have a debrief after I finish the live streaming. So next
Thank
week I am back with another entrepreneur Thursday morning again, around 8 o'clock in the morning. So it's a weekly thing, turns into a weekly podcast. So thank you again, Andy.
Thank you, Ivanka. Appreciate it.